Young people, freedom is not free. Someone always has to pay the price. The price is high, but Americans have always been willing to pay it when necessary.
This is the invasion of Hitler's Europe, the 0 hour of the Second Front, fighting their way up the beaches into the fortress of Nazi.
My advice to you is to keep yourself prepared.
But a large proportion of this assault is believed to be in the hands of American men.
Because it may be your turn the next time freedom is threatened.
Everything we are, everything we have is at stake. Our losses will be heavy, but we and our allies will go on fighting together to ultimate total victory.
Belle journée pour vous. Mon cher monsieur, vous m'avez donné ça. Ça, je partirai avec. Ça, c'est le symbole de la libération, de la liberté et d'une France retrouvée. C'est géant. Pour moi, il n'y a pas d'expression pour dire la grandeur, le dévouement, le courage de ces soldats et de leurs officiers. Merci aux États-Unis.
We got into the service as soon as we could. And combat changes you. In other words, I was an innocent high school kid, right out of high school. When I came back, I was a badass paratrooper. Now you're 85 years old, and somebody is telling you 72 years ago, right where you're standing now, you were a 19-year-old kid with a machine gun waiting for the first German attack. Everything that I had put back here hit me in the face like a cement block. I even heard the artillery noise going off again. My life changed, and I felt I had done a service. The world was better off for what we did in World War II.
A military transport pulls into Cam Ranh Bay with more men to bolster U.S. forces in South Vietnam. The 3,900 paratroopers are members of the 101st
Being
Airborne.
put in command of an infantry company in Vietnam, I mean, that was such a privilege. I had to serve on the staff and wait my turn, but I was actually put in the queue and then eventually took command of B Company 2nd 327 and was able just to apply everything that I'd learned as a young officer at that point. We were constantly on patrol. We'd get in maybe once every 6 weeks for a little stand down where you'd get a real shower and get cleaned up and have a hot meal, and then you'd go back out. So just learning to live that life, living out of a rucksack for weeks on end was, I don't know if I call that a highlight, but it was an experience that kind of convinces you that you can be a pretty good soldier, because I was challenged keeping up with my NCOs and young officers and all of that. I was all of 26, so.
You do not grieve alone. We grieve as a nation, together. As together we say goodbye to those who died in the service of their country.
We stopped in Gander, Newfoundland first. And when we got off the airplane, they took us to a hangar that was a makeshift morgue in which 248 dead Screaming Eagles were laid out in their last formation in body bags.
They were going home. And so we pray, receive, O Lord, into your heavenly kingdom the men and women of the 101st Airborne, the men and women of the great and fabled Screaming Eagles.
And it was a scene that is indelibly imprinted in my mind. And I remember General Wickham walking out into the middle of that formation of dead soldiers and dropping down on his knees. And stayed there in silent prayer for a few minutes. There was dead silence in this hangar.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait.
A young soldier came up to me, and you know how soldiers are. They're not scared of generals, and they'll come right at you, which I just enjoyed. But this young man came to me and he said, "Hey, sir," he said, "I've heard all this history, and I believe in all that history, and I think it's important, and I'm proud to be a Screaming Eagle in that history, but it's now time for ours. And I sure wish now, as you put that plan together," and he obviously must have heard some names on the plan. He said, "I sure wish you'd put something there about who we are." And I said, "Well, what are you thinking about here?" I said, I have no problem with that. I'm glad you kind of talked to me about that kind of directness." And he said, "Well, you know, we're out here with all these Cobras. Why don't you call one of these places Cobra?" And so I said, "Okay, we'll call that Forward Operations Base Cobra."
The moment is the air assault into the Euphrates River Valley. I was in a command and control bird, and with Pete Kinney, my S3 was fantastic S3, later commanded first the 187. And as I mentioned earlier, we were flying at 200 AGL and for an hour and 16 minutes and going into very bad weather. And so the unknown was right, staring us right in the face. And it was a very dramatic experience. As a micro segment of that moment, we flew over FOB Cobra and the 1st Brigade troops, and I think they had 2nd and 502nd attached to them. And as this, you can imagine a gaggle of 66 Blackhawks at 200 feet AGL flying over this FOB that had been established 24 hours earlier, less than that. The soldiers of the 1st Brigade raised their rifles above their head like this as we went. Raced on into the Euphrates, and that was a magical piece of that moment.
Today, our fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
9/11 happened, and we had to bring the whole post and division together, and we pretty much pushed out 3rd Brigade and an aviation task force pretty quickly into Afghanistan. During that time, you know, what do you remember most? I remember staying up for about 4 or 5 days when Battle of Anaconda went down in Afghanistan, the first major battle that the Rakkasans led. And the fact that we were able to air assault in 1,400 plus soldiers into that valley and fight for 7 days and come out without losing a helicopter, but more importantly, without losing a single soldier in a place where the Russians had faced great defeat because of the terrain. But the 101st has something special in my heart because just like the sign there over in Vietnam, if you want it done, call the 101.
Guidons. This is Eagle 6. The 101st Airborne Division's next rendezvous with destiny is north to Baghdad. Upward Desert Eagle 2 is in effect. Godspeed, air assault, out. Well, I remember, in fact, the moment after the fight to Baghdad. Obviously, we're busy fighting, and the battles of Najaf and Karbala and Hilla, and we're now finally in South Baghdad, and there's a little bit of a slowdown in the pace. The regime has collapsed, and we're positioning our forces. And Sergeant Major Hill and I decided it was time to sew the patch on our right shoulder, our combat patch. And it was really a very emotional moment for both of us. He mentioned how many, he'd served decades in the division, and now all of a sudden he has that patch on his right shoulder as well as on his left. So again, something that meant a great deal to both of us. It wasn't the greatest of sewing jobs, but there it was, and you know, we were both feeling to ourselves, no matter what happens down the road, they can never take this patch off our right shoulder.
Our division, through our application of warfare, has turned that 101st Airborne patch into a representation of the entire United States.
General Drew Pappas, I tell you, I got that 101 blood runs through my body. We knew the fight we were going to get into. We knew the human, the physical terrain. The foundation is that engaged leadership. And you have to have buy-in. You have to know your soldiers. You have to know the formation. And you build trust through that shared hardship. And then it's tough, hard, realistic training. And first, you're blessed. You're blessed with incredible leadership at echelon in that division. You really are. And when they're bought in and you're building that team, and they know what that vision is of going back to combat, and there are a lot of combat veterans there, they know what it entails. And when you have a shared vision, a shared end state, and a shared culture and that legacy of heroism, that drove us. That drove us to be the formation that we were that deployed.
Being here so close to that fight is exactly where the 101st Airborne Division was destined to be.
And in World War II, they said wherever the American soldier went, freedom followed. And now I would suggest wherever the American soldier goes, wherever our Screaming Eagles goes, freedom stays. And that's why they're there today.
This is a poem I wrote when reflecting about what the 101st means to me. And I entitled it, There's Magic in the Patch. There's magic in the patch. When you put it on your shoulder, it makes you stand a little taller and feel a little bolder. You're a Screaming Eagle now, and those who came before you were heroes when it counted most. You know you can be one too. They came to fame in World War II. They fought with pride and guts. When the Germans demanded their surrender, McAuliffe just said nuts. The picture was flashed around the world. The image was a sensation. Old Abe, the Screaming Eagle patch, inspired a worried nation. The 101st became a household name. Her troopers fought time and again. Vietnam, Desert Storm, Iraq, and Afghanistan. Their courage has no end. Whenever I see that patch today, I feel a sense of pride. I know that trooper wearing Old Abe has what it takes inside to carry forth the Eagle's spirit that all who wear it catch and serve with courage and distinction, because there's magic in the patch.
People identify that red, white, and blue flag. People identify Old Abe, that Screaming Eagle patch.
Why is Fort Campbell and 101st so special? It's because the leaders that taught me how to be who I am today.
Can't help but want to give everything that you have towards the division and towards the fight, not really for you, but selflessly for those that have given their lives for the division.
We are 20,000 American soldiers united by a common legacy of 80 years of service, sacrifice, and heroism. We know that freedom isn't free, and we know that someone has to pay the price. When General William Lee, the first commanding general of the 101st Airborne Division, said, "We have a rendezvous with destiny," what he meant in today's words is that our future is war. Looking forward, I know sometime in the next 80 years, the 101st Airborne Division Air Assault will find itself in a fight defending the values of the free world and all that we hold dear. And when that fight happens, not just the Army, not just the nation, but the entire world will look to Screaming Eagle soldiers to lead the way.
But here's what I'll tell you, and here's what they would tell you. Every generation has its heroes, and the generations that followed and the generations that serve today are no different. Every generation has its heroes, and we get to serve with them every single day. And that's what's great about being in the Army, and that's what's great about being the 101st Airborne Division.